Talking for you.
Oh, I think we're back. I turned it off and on again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, I went to Zahadoom and didn't die. Hurrah. Yeah, I'm not sure OBS was playing up, but yeah, we're back, so hurrah.
Yeah, it's not great.
Is it not? Oh, it's doing weird stuff again. Hang on. Oh, that's weird. It's routing my desktop audio through the microphone because it's going up in time with the music. Bear with me. Right, is that any better? Doesn't look like it's going as high as it was. Shouldn't be clipping, hopefully.
Seem better.
Okay, better? Great. Hurrah! Oh, yeah, that was all a bit weird. Yeah, it seems to be like more sensitive than usual to my speakers. Maybe I just turn them like down and or off.
Why don't you put the shrimp back on?
Well, yeah, you know, the only thing that's changed is I turned off my shrimp pump because it was being really, really noisy. Perhaps this is what it always sounded like without the shrimp. That's oh, I did that whole clipping thing again. We'll keep rolling with it and see how we get on, and I will try and stop it from clipping. Let me know if it's if you can't hear me. Now the shrimp are good. We currently have 5 shrimp in the tank. There were like 20 in there, but we had a mass die-off a couple of months back. But yeah, they seem to be fine. I didn't eat them, honest. Right then. Onward with what we were going to do. So on the last stream, we were working on our task management system, raising tasks for the bridge crew and having them be able to do automated ship-wide objectives. The current situation is that the helm side seems to be done. We'll get to the star system and it will patiently wait for the sensors to do a scan, but the sensors are scanning over and over. They don't seem to stop doing a scan, so we just need to look at the logic and work out what's going there. So we're basically looking to see whether or not we have a task raised already to do the medium range survey. If we do, it should skip and not do anything. If we don't, then we'll do the scan. But I think where we are failing is that we need to redo this check here. So actually no, that's fine, because basically this is pulsing once per second. So if that should return false once the survey is finished, because we should have access to our save data. Hang on, let's just check this. I don't know whether I set this up properly. Right, so we're getting our exploration data and we're looking for matching coordinates. Okay. Okay, so we're setting missing from data as true, and that's our final decision-making process there. So missing from data becomes false if we get a hit. Okay, so I think that, yeah, that needs branching, because we don't want to do that unless we have something, unless we know that that is a valid reference. So if missing from data is false, we want to do this. Okay, and if it's true, then yeah, we want to go straight into there. Okay, so it's in the data, checking to see whether any of the planets are less than 2. If they are, then we're matching our criteria. Right, and that's more of an up there thing. So right, so we're checking for missing data there, and if we're missing the exploration data, it means basically there is none. So we can just go straight to yes. So we require a survey. And then when we're checking our criteria, if anything exists in the system that's not at least level 2, then that's our criteria we're looking for. So we've got a match, therefore we do need a scan. Otherwise we do not. So hopefully that will stop it infinitely looping like it is now currently. Let's just give that a quick try. does seem to be overly sensitive tonight, and I don't know why. It's not normally that sensitive. Can everyone just hear Claire chewing?
I couldn't finish my cereal.
She was eating crunchy nut cornflakes, in case anyone was wondering. All Total War. No, I work on this game all day, every day, pretty much. I work 7 days a week, as many hours as I can fit in.
You don't even know how true that is, AJ. I have to force him to make a cup of tea in the morning because he just gets straight on his desk.
It is true. It is true. I do literally roll out of bed, like roll over to my desk, sit down, and just start.
Yeah, and his bed happens to be right next to where I'm sitting, so it's not even that far.
Mm. Oops. Right.
I do have noisy snacks. Making me self-conscious. I'm gonna stop eating.
Yeah, I do at the moment. Our adult daughter has moved back in with us temporarily, so whilst we put a divider up in one of our rooms, I'm having to sleep out here, which is not the end of the world. I don't mind sleeping next to my desk. It just makes my morning commute quicker. Okay, so as soon as we arrive at the system, and we are 34 seconds away, we should see the sensor task appear on here, and then it should start doing the medium range survey. It should also change the sensor mode actually, so if we just position ourselves here, we should see it move to medium range mode on the sensors, and then initiate the scan. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so it's just started doing the scan. Now what has been happening is as soon as this scan finishes, it just then starts doing another one. So we'll have to see whether or not it does that or not. Okay, yeah, so it's doing it again. Right, so that's basically what we want to stop it from doing. So it must be the case that it's not saving that scan data. Oh, and we've arrived inside the star for good measure. Right, let's see if we can work out what's going on. Yeah, sort of with the rebasing. So the galaxy is split into 1 light year cubes, and then further subdivided into 100 light year cubes. So when it comes to moving the ship physically, we are never further than half a light year from the world origin. Obviously the center of the 1 light year cube is the world origin, so you've got half a light year in every direction that the ship can move physically through space. Now we could subdivide that down further if floating point errors are an issue, and then we can split that 1 light year cube into even smaller cubes, but so far we haven't had a need to. But we'll keep assessing that as we go. But essentially, what happens is when the ship reaches the edge of one of those 1 light year cubes, it's then teleported to the opposing edge of that cube, and then your coordinates increment by 1. So what you're actually doing is going to the side of the cube, teleport back, side of the cube, teleport back, and you're constantly doing this as you're flying through space. And what's happening is, because the galactic coordinates are incrementing as you're teleporting between each edge of this cube, you have the effect of moving the entire galaxy around as you go. And the position of the stars you see outside the window are positioned basically with a very, very long decimal floating point, because we're taking the distance in centimeters that you've traveled from the world origin, and again that could be up to half a light year in centimeters, which is a massive, massive number. But then we are dividing that by like 0.5 for the distance that you are from the 1 light year coordinate. So we end up with a really, really long decimal number. And that's how we use that really, really small decimal to move the stars smoothly out the window. We do get floating point jitter with that because of obviously the length of the decimal, but because they are single points that are quite far away from the ship, you don't actually see the jitter at those distances, so it all kind of works out. But yeah, so it's basically an origin rebasing system. Not so much locked danger mouse, more the fact that those things will be out of range. So each sensor mode has a working range that it can find things at. So you're not going to see stars on a short range scan because it can only go a couple of million kilometers. There are 18 million real world stars that are in a database, and the rest of them are procedural. So basically 2,000 light years around Sol, those are practically all real world stars. Beyond that range is all procedural. And the reason we went with 2,000 light years is because we want to make sure that all known constellations are properly represented in the game. And most of the stars for the known constellations are within 2,000 light years. So that's kind of where we came up with that number. Plus it keeps the data relatively small. All of the real world stellar data is about 4 gig in size, which isn't terrible. Considering that's 18 million stars, 4 gigs actually quite a reasonable size. Yeah, we're using 64-bit floats for the world coordinates. So they're all double vectors. Hey Max. Right, so basically the issue we're having is this is returning true even after we've completed the medium range survey. So let's just track what we're doing with that. So we're creating our task, and then the sensors are picking up the task. So they'll do their tick. So it looks for the sensors task, see is there a task pending. Oh, I'm wondering actually whether we're not clearing the task. That's probably the issue. We're not clearing the task. So as far as this is concerned, that task still needs actioning, because it's not being removed from the queue. So yeah, so this is probably working fine. I'd expect that to be working fine. We're just not getting rid. So on here we need to set up our success criteria so that we can clear that task off. So when we are performing a medium range survey, let's just pop in a reroute node for that. We need to build our success criteria here. And this needs to fire and complete, I guess, before this does another check. And we know that this is checking once per second. So when it comes to the success criteria, really, let's do that 10 times per second. Sticky number 1. It's better. My number 1 and my number 4 were touching for some reason. Okay. Yeah, so 10 times a second we will check the criteria. And then we're only checking the task once per second. So we've got 10 chances to complete that and clear it off the queue before it checks again. And then if we... Essentially, we need basically to do this. So we're doing literally the same thing. Create a couple of local variables. So first of all, does the exploration data have any record of the system that we're talking about? If it does not, then it's missing from the data, and we will need to get a shot of that. So basically do nothing in that instance. In fact, do nothing, yeah. If it's not missing from the data, then we need to check to see whether or not any medium range scans are needed. So if criteria match is true, then we are going to do nothing, because we basically need to have this task sat in the queue. If that is false, then we need to clear this task from the queue. So, what did I... Yeah, so that macro that I already made, we will clear off our sensors task. So let's just collapse that. Right, so that will clear that task off if true. Oh, I had this happen yesterday. If you copy the contents of a collapsed node, including the output pin, and you paste it somewhere else, it actually breaks the references in the collapsed node. So that's why we've got these null references here. So even though they do actually exist, even if we refresh the node, you can see there they disappeared, although they still exist here. So even if we delete them from here and recreate them, because we can just do that, it still returns an error. So I found that the only way of fixing that was to... See, I can't even press delete on that now. Delete has been disabled. So just copy the whole thing, get rid of that entire node, paste it back in, collapse it back to a collapsed node, and then set it all up again. Absolute nightmare, but it's the only way I've noticed to fix it. I just need to remember, if I'm copying the contents of a collapsed node, do not copy the output pin. And now it compiles. Yeah, the lining up of stars to form like linear lines in the galaxy is because they're locked to a 1 light year grid. Now what I'm going to do at some point when we update the galaxy is have probably a smaller decimal breakdown for each 1 light year cube. Maybe we'll split it into 10 so that the stars can actually have multiple locations within that region, so that we're not locking each single star system in the exact middle of our 1 light year grid, because it does create quite an obvious grid when there's a very highly packed region full of stars, and it means that no star can be closer together than 1 light year. So yeah, we'll be fixing that at some point. Of course, the reason we did that is because having the star system centered around the origin, the middle of that cube, obviously the closer everything is to the world origin, the better. So that's kind of where we went with that originally. But I think we can risk moving it further away. Talking of jitter, just to kind of highlight the issue, we need to fix this as well. So dismissing the NPC is often unreliable, so that's something I need to sort out. But if we just engage the FTL a minute and come down here, so whilst the ship is moving laterally, so we have 0 rotation in our movement, then you can see that the world is moving slowly, and we're 1 AU from the world origin in centimeters. So whatever that is in centimeters is a very, very big number. But you can see we have 0 surface jitter from the texture, from the ship or anything. It's absolutely rock solid. But because of the way we're currently attaching planets to a single anchor point, if I add rotation to the mix, you can see that the surface of Earth starts to jitter. You can see it more clearly on procedural planets because we have much more detailed surfaces. But the texture wobbles all over the place, which is basically just floating point jitter. But it only does it on rotation. As soon as the ship settles down and rotation stops, then all the jitter goes away. I don't know why that is. I can only put it down to the fact that all the planets are attached to a single anchor, which is, again, 1 AU away in this instance. But on the new system, which we've already got working on the Caravella map, is all objects in space manage their own location and spawn their own proxies. So things that you look out and see out the window, like planets, they're no longer going to be attached to a single anchor point. They'll work out their visual representation just using pure math, which means we don't have to worry about actors being attached to other actors or anything like that. And it completely eliminates jitter. So we had a whole bunch of potatoes bouncing around as a proxy for some asteroids, and there was completely zero jitter from the floating point side of things. So I think that's basically a solved problem. We just need to implement that for planets. But anyway, oh yeah, I keep forgetting that left click is now sit by default, so I keep sitting by accident, and then obviously F brings up the menu. Okay, so if we that's properly messed up. Interesting. Let's get us back over to Alpha Centauri, and then we will check to see whether this scan completes once and only once. Hey, thank you. Yeah, it's great when it works. So for anyone that's not seen our recent streams, everything is now driven by this contextual radial menu. So if you look at a prop and press F, you'll have actions that are specific to that prop, depending on what that is. So if it's something that you can consume, obviously drink will be one of the options that you've got on here. Whereas for something like the globe, like spin the globe might be one of the options that we add. And the options that appear on the menu are driven by the thing that you happen to be looking at. So like with the chair, for example, sit down is the option that it gives you, whereas for this guy sat here, we've got actions that are relevant to the sensor station. And if you just look at nothing and bring it up, then you can do things like dance moves, emotes, and do our shipwide orders. So the idea is that this radial menu is continually updating its context. And that worked. So he did the scan, and he then stopped scanning because the task disappeared. So excellent. Right, so the next thing is we need to sort out that. I'm assuming, yeah, so we're not passing through a target radius when we select our long range target, so let's just grab another one. Hang on, what's our closest planet from here? You'll do. Okay, so this one has brought up a target radius. I wonder why it didn't before. I don't know what it wants. Probably wants feeding. Yeah, looks like it's hungry. They've been fed like 6 times today already. Yeah, it's not the ship's cat, it's a real cat. I think Jonesy was around here somewhere. I can't remember whether I put him on this map or not. Right, let me just check that radius problem again. Okay, so we selected Alpha Centauri. So right now we've got no target. If we use our command target, it's giving us the radius of the star. Okay. And of course we've got no task here because we didn't issue an order specifically. So if we make that an order, so that comes up on there. And we still have a radius. Okay, so there is a set of events which doesn't give us a radius. We just need to work out what it is. Okay, so it's no target set right now. Interesting. Okay, we'll have to we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Obviously at some point something happens to clear out that target radius, and we don't want that. Right, so we can delta, but the issue with it is, I've mentioned this before on stream about drawing that cone. So when you're facing a planet, obviously you have to draw a cone which intersects with the radius of that object in the world, and obviously depending on where you are, that cone is smaller or larger in terms of its angle. Now the issue is where in the circumference of that cone's base do you pick to aim the ship? So yes, it's possible, but it's going to need more math in terms of working out what that angle is. But yeah, we won't always be arriving head on. Just out of interest, I want to see whether or not he stops in the right place, because the radius is there, which means we should not hit the star. And that's about to disappear off there. Yep, that's good. So her job is done, and we've got 2 pips on all of those planets. So his, look, it's gone to 0. Okay, so I think something the sensors are doing is affecting the target radius on the helm, because the target radius is what the autopilot is using to know when to stop, essentially, because it has the radius of the object and it adds 1.5 to that value. And right now, with a radius of 0, we're never actually going to arrive, so we're just going to keep spinning. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, so ordinarily, when you pick a target from the sensors, it sends a payload, and that payload contains a lot of information about that target, including its radius and various other bits and bobs. When you select something on the holo display, you have some of that information available to you, but not all of it. So it's only passing through the things that are pertinent. So when we use the radial menu, do we have that here? Yep, there. Where's our thingy? Yeah, so the only thing we're passing through from the radial menu is this action ID. So we get our player character, and we're sending a specific action ID on our broadcast channel. And that's what comes through here. So if it's one of the chair actions, we just manage that through here. And if it's on any other channel, we send that straight through to the player controller as a command order. And the order itself is whatever the action ID is. So on the player controller, if we go to our event graph, that's at the bottom here. So the command order comes in as a client action. We convert that into a server action, and then we further differentiate between our channel, so whether or not it's a change of alert condition, or it's a shipwide order, or it's a command for the helm. We start separating out the different channels that we're sending broadcasts on. And again, we've got that action ID as our context. So when it comes to, say, a helm order, so like navigating back to Earth, so nav to Earth, we are giving it the radius of Earth and the coordinates of Earth. And in this case, that's hard-coded. In other instances where we're getting our command target, we're pulling that from the stored command target, which interestingly we're not. I don't think I finished setting this up. Hang on, let's go to the shipwide one. Yeah, so here you can see we're grabbing the command target, and the command target is what's set when you press one of the stars on the holo display, and that contains basically just this information. So we've got the name, the coordinates, and its radius. So when we actually create our shipwide order, that information is stored from that point in that order. So once this has been fired, you're then free to select a completely different command target, and it won't affect the order because we've already stored that separately. Although whilst we are doing this, we may as well finish off the direct commands, which was so use command target, it's that one, and then we want those pieces in there. So again, what we're doing is we're creating a task. Oh, actually, no, sorry. The reason I didn't put that in is because it's not actually needed. So yeah, so we're not giving it the coordinates on this one. We're telling it just to press the button. So we're basically waiting for that button to be pressed. That's why I didn't give it the coordinates. And the same with this one, so use sensor target. So this one as well. It doesn't need to be given any coordinates because we're just getting the NPC to press the button on the UI. Yeah, that one again is just a button press, so we don't need coordinates. Navigate to Earth is a different scenario because we're having to tell it precisely where Earth is in this instance, so that one has got coordinates. And again, these two here, they don't need coordinates because we're setting an order that will require a multi-part action. So we're saying navigate to the command target. So we're raising that as a task And then when they process that task, they will know that they have to first of all press the use sensor target or use command target button on the UI, and then do things like engage the autopilot and engage the FTL. So that there are multiple actions that are triggered as a result of this particular task being given to them. So when it comes to knowing the radius of the object, we are passing that through. So again, that's coming from here. So the task that exists for the ship-wide order has a reference to the target radius of the object, and we know that's being set. So I don't think it's being lost from here. I think what's happening is when the sensors are doing something, they're triggering a change on the helm itself. So we just need to work out what it is they're doing that's triggering that. No worries, Delta, will do. It doesn't, Illusion, no. We're not even reading them at the other end, so it doesn't matter what they're set to. In fact, there will be on the bridge tasks struct, we're going to have a lot of additional variables on here as well for the different bridge stations. So things like setting the shift pattern, or whether it's day shift or night shift, that'll be on here as well for the environmental control. But that will never be used outside of environmental control. So the struct is going to have a lot of in case we need it variables for each of the 11 bridge stations. So anything that we're not explicitly setting, if you untick it, then you're just not setting it, essentially. So whatever the default is specified on the struct itself, so the struct blueprint that you create, that's where you set the defaults. So it will use those defaults that are pre-configured, unless you tick it, in which case it will use whatever value you set. But yeah, for most of the time, we won't even be reading half of them. Right, so where did we get to? So we know that we're able to arrive, we're able to do a medium range survey. We are losing our radius on the helm, but I'm going to ignore that for a minute. And we'll continue the logic chain. So we're getting to there, that is completing successfully. We're getting to there, and that is completing successfully. So the next step is to work out if we need a medium range scan. So a similar thing to before, and in fact I'm going to copy this, but not that box, because the logic was slightly improved on the other version. So we're going to look for anything which is less than level 3 knowledge. So again, if we end up setting criteria matched to true, that means we do indeed need that medium range, so that short range scan. And if there's nothing in the data at all, then equally we're going to need that scan. Although this bit is kind of redundant, because you'd think that for us to reach this point on the logic, then we already would have determined that scan's needed anyway. So so we are doubling up on checks a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so that should be that. Yeah, so if So if we return false on this, that we're not requiring any short-range scans, then that's basically success. We have completed our shipwide objective, and then that objective can be cleared off. So we need to go through our shipwide orders and remove that from our queue, and essentially that is job done. If we do find that one of the objects requires a short-range scan, then the next thing we need to do is find closest planet. So find closest target. So this one's slightly more complicated. So what we need to do is we need to go through all of the targets that are in this system, and for each one we need to compare them against our saved exploration data. So we're basically saying, are you scanned to the level required? If so, move on. If not, we'll add them to a separate array and then add a distance to that. And then we will simply decide which one is the lowest distance away, and that's the one that we will target. Now we might actually already have some of that code on here, because we were doing some work on that. So that was that one. Yeah, and it must have been the actual blueprint itself. Yeah, so we did some of that before. So going through our objects, or was that? Oh, that's just targeting it, isn't it? Yes, that's being fired from somewhere. What was firing that? Yeah, that one. I think I was already pre-configuring it there as well. So this is the old non-task driven setup that we had that wasn't persistent, so that's why we kind of dumped this and went with our current much more robust approach. But there were a few functions we did for this which we still need, and it would be handier to copy paste them than it would to recreate them, but I don't think we've got the logic here for actually identifying which planet it was or should be. No matter, rather than digging through it all trying to find it, we shall just do it again. So one thing we're going to need on here is we need the global event that's broadcast out by the Galaxy Gen when you are within a star system. So we always send out the local data, which only gets generated when you're actually there. Otherwise, we'd be generating thousands of star systems worth of data all at once, and that would never work. That's the sensor version. Right, this is the local system version. So yeah, we send out this broadcast with essentially the details of the star system. So we need to make sure that we listen for this broadcast and capture a copy of this data every time that we enter a new star system, so that on here we have a reference to that data. So let's just split that up a bit so it's neater. So do that, and then we want to get globe event handler. Again, this is the plugin that I want to delete. But I can't delete it until we've replaced all of the instances of it with the gameplay message subsystem. So it's a bit of a monumental task. So event sector location details. So when we enter a new system, the payload here is all the details for that system. So we want to cast to event sector location details, and then we want to get our variable, and then we will promote this to a variable on this blueprint. Now this is running on the server, so we don't need to worry about replication. It doesn't need to be replicated because we're just going off of our local data. So armed with this, every time the ship transitions 1 light year into the next sector location, this will fire, that gets set, and now we have a reference to all the planets and everything within that system. And indeed anything else within that system that is relevant to tasks and sensors and everything else. So, where are we? Go back to our logic. So when we're finding our closest planet, we will grab a copy of that array. This is essentially all of the planets and moons and anything else that are within this star system. So these are all the things which are pertinent for scanning. And then for each of those, we want to know, are they within this data? And if so, what is their current knowledge level? And then we need to use that to identify, first of all, which ones have not been scanned sufficiently, and then which one of that subsection is closest to us, and that's the one we'll fly to. Right, what have we got? That's blah, 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 blah. Couldn't remember whether we're adding knowledge level to this. I don't think we are. Yeah, because it would mean re-updating it each time, so we're keeping that separate. Right, so there's all our exploration data, so that's every system we've ever scanned, and now we need to do the comparison between the two. So we know that we have the data because for us to have gotten to this point, we've already tested twice that that we've actually got something saved for that system. So we don't need to test that a third time. Yes, Sol and some of Alpha Centauri will be 100% scanned already as a starting point. So we're using the seed as our ID on this. Actually, so that the first thing we should do and we might do this sooner because I'm conscious of how many times we're looping this, and I'm thinking we can probably I think that's what I was starting to do here actually. What we can do is we can do the check that we're doing here to see whether or not we have any data already for this system, and if we do, then we'll want to save that data so that we can compare against it whilst we're doing all this logic. So rather than having to re-loop this array multiple times, we'll do it the once when we start the logic check, save it to a variable, and then just refer to that from that point on, because it will update this once per second. So if anything changes 1 second later, we've got the latest picture. Yeah, well, the eventual goal with that is that the computer core is going to have server racks and storage units and data stores and things, and they will have health values and things associated with them. So it'll be good to have them damaged and lose access to your saved data and your saved scan data within the game, within the various game UIs, because that data storage unit is damaged. Now, I don't think we want to go as far as losing it permanently, because you're then taking away players' time, and we don't want to do that. But we can render it inaccessible within the realms of the game. So you can't access that saved scan data, and you'll come up on the sensors and you'll have no data for anything because that storage device is damaged. Once you repair the storage device, then you can access the data again. I think that's a nice way of adding that depth to the data system within the game without permanently losing things that players have done. I know I certainly I wouldn't want to have spent like months and months scanning stuff only to have it be wiped out by an unlucky torpedo hit. Okay, So we've got our coordinates that we've added to our task. We're comparing that to the saved coordinates for each of those systems. So if we have a match, we will just use that. In fact, we'll probably use the other one. The reason I've named this so vaguely is so that we can reuse it multiple times without having to make a whole bunch of local variables. And then on the completion pin, we will grab that. So if the criteria match is true, so we've found a match in the data, we've flipped that to true, we've stopped looping the array, and then we'll take that same array element and we will promote that to a local variable, and we will call that our exploration data. And then we will collapse all this. I think we'll just do a simple throughput there. And we either will or will not set that. Yeah, so we can check against this because we've got whether or not there's any explorable bodies in there, or even matching coordinates. So if this fails, then that remains its default values, which is this. So we can check to see whether or not it's currently defaulted, in which case we can use that as our decision making rather than having to set an additional boolean. Okay, so if we were to do that first, then obviously we've now captured that. So when it comes to things like this, rather than having to loop through looking for that data a second time, we can instead grab that, and rather than using this, we can say is that greater than 0. So if it is, then we know that we then have something to check. Actually, if we rather than do that, if we check the length of that, that's even more relevant. Yeah, so if the length of that array is greater than 0, then we definitely have planets. And then we can go ahead and do the scan. Otherwise, we carry on. Which means we don't need to do that, or that, or that. We can just do that. It just makes that a little bit leaner, and we're not doing quite as much array looping. although we do need a copy of that. Right, so if we've got any stored system bodies, then we loop through them, see if any of them are less than 2. If they are, then we're going to go ahead and do our medium range survey, or if there's no data. So if we've done our check, we haven't updated this with anything, it's going to be 0, therefore we need to do our medium range survey anyway. And then similarly, we can do the same thing on here. So we don't need that. We can get rid of that. Keep that. That can stay the same. And then our logic for that one, same thing. I will check the length of our array. There. Get it in the right place. And again, I need to pop that in there. Put that back there. Okay. That should do it. So same thing, if we've got data, loop the data, work out if any of them are less than 3. If they are, we need to do a short range scan, or if the data's blank, which it shouldn't be anyway, otherwise continue. Right, which takes us back to here. So now, rather than having to trying to identify our data, we actually have that data already prepared for us. So all we need to do is grab our system bodies, and then for each of those, and the number of system bodies should be equal to the number of satellite objects, because ultimately when we create our saved scan data, it's this array that we're using to build this array, so there should be the same number in both. But it's not a guarantee necessarily that they have the same index for each object, so we can't assume a like for like index. So just to be on the safe side, what we'll do is we will compare an ID instead. So basically, does that ID equal that ID? In which case we can build up another array with our knowledge level. What's the best way of doing that? So let's get rid of that. Right, so for each planet, we're looking through our saved data to see whether or not that planet has a knowledge level. So ideally, what we're going to send to after, so we're going to find, so we want, basically we want the location and radius again of the target object, because ultimately we're sending this to the helm. So the first thing we need to do is set it as our current target on the sensors, across, yeah, and then we need to press the send to helm button. So we don't want to create a task directly. We want to send it to the helm via the button, and then have the helm NPC press that button so that the process that the NPCs are following is exactly the same process that the players would follow. So we're not kind of sending the data kind of in the background behind the scenes. We're actually having them interact with those consoles on a one-to-one basis. We possibly could sort the arrays, but then no, we couldn't, because the data that's held within this array is literally that. So we've got the ID of the object and its knowledge level. So there's no sort criteria that we can sort on. Now it should be the case that the array indexes do match, because again we're building this array from this array. So for each one of these we're essentially saying ID of whatever the seed is and knowledge level beginning at 0 when we initialize the array. But I don't trust it. I don't trust that it's always going to be a match, so I'd rather do the check to make sure for sure that it's a match, rather than just assuming that it went fine when we actually authored the array in the first place. Just in case. Yeah, so having done this, we now know for each of these, which should be a large system object, this one, yeah. So this is what we need to send to the helm, to the sensors console, to simulate the NPC selecting that object from the UI on the sensors. So from a player's perspective, when the player gets this task, the task that they will see on their HUD is select the next target to explore. So they'll look at the list, see either the closest one or one they just like the look of, but we'll leave that up to the player to decide which target they select next. Obviously it has to be within that star system, but they can just click the UI, send it to the helm, job done. For the NPC, it's slightly more awkward because the list of targets that are there on the screen are dynamically created, and they're kind of instances of a widget. So they don't physically exist. So we need to do a little bit of behind the scenes work to make sure that we find out which one of those relates to the coordinates that we've got saved here, and artificially trigger that object as having been pressed. So we can make the NPC sort of reach its hand out and kind of jab at the screen. But that particular entry on the list has to react like it's been pressed. So we have to have a little bit of code running on the sensors where we inject the coordinates for that object. So it then needs to go and look at all the objects that are there, work out which one matches those coordinates, and then trigger the has been pressed function. At that point, it is no different than the player having pressed it, because the same follow-on functions will be the same whether it's the player or whether we trigger the button remotely. And then the same applies with the send to helm button, because again, whether the player presses it physically or whether we trigger it remotely via the NPC, the same actions occur when the button's been triggered. So again, it's that one-to-one action between the player and the NPC pressing the buttons on the UI. And by doing it like that, it means a bystander watching can physically see those buttons being pressed as well. So the buttons will flash like they've been pressed, whether the player does it or the NPC does it, just so you can see the NPCs doing their work. And from a logic perspective, it's easier from the code side of things if those actions are always following a predicted path. So we're always acting on button presses rather than arbitrary code injection along the line. So the two things that we have to do here is first we need to identify the closest target, because that's the criteria the NPC is going to use. The player is free to pick any target they want within the system, but the NPC will always pick the closest one to the ship. That's just kind of the logic that they'll follow. Yeah, and then we need to make sure that we do the logic on the sensors so that we can inject that button press. And let's just do the ID side of it first. Hello.
Hello.
Claire has returned.
I have. Adult children have been and gone.
Mm-hmm.
Adult children.
Ah, yes, our various array of adult kids are visiting for the weekend, so me and Claire have got 5 kids between us, so it's a bit hectic.
Yeah.
It's too many kids.
Especially at Mother's Weekend.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Just to remind everyone, it is in fact Mother's Day this Sunday in the UK, so just a reminder, there will be no Sunday stream. I shall be visiting my dearest mama. Right. Exactly that, Dave, yes. So one of the ship-wide tasks will be reflective of various ship conditions. So if you set the ship as cold and dark, you're basically instructing the entire crew to set the ship to that condition. So whatever buttons need pressing, whatever things need switching on or off, the NPC engineers will go and physically do that and press those buttons. And if you then decide that actually you want the ship to be flight ready, the NPCs will do that as well. The NPCs will go off and set the ship to flight ready by pressing the buttons physically. Again, we want the NPCs to be pressing the same buttons as the player would be pressing, just so we can keep the whole thing as close as possible in terms of that one-to-one simulation. Right, so I'm going to need an array, and I think if I'm not mistaken, I think we added a distance. Yeah, we had a distance value in there. And that's not the actual distance, because the actual distance is in the orbital characteristics. That's like an arbitrary distance that we can set based on where the ship is. So we can use that. We can use that to build our array of how far things are. So if we promote that to a local variable and we make that an array, and that's just a temporary array for our large system objects. And then for each object where we've got a matching ID, what we want to do is we want to set members in this with the distance. We want to get the ship's location, so we grab our game state and then we get a ship goes to stars in game state, get ship state, grab the Magellan, which is reference 0, get, rather break that, And then the only thing we care about is our local coordinates. So that's where the ship is right now in relation to that star system. And we want to compare that to where this object is, so their local coordinates. So that's the local coordinates of that planet within the system. So we look at the distance between those two vectors, and both of these are in centimeters, so it's a large number. And that's what we're setting within that struct. So hang on, I just thought of another bit of logic here. So if the ID and the seed match, let's just swap these around the other way. Yeah, so if those match and that is less than 3, because again we only want to go to the ones which have not been scanned fully. So our criteria is matching the planet, checking our knowledge level. So if both of those are true, then we're going to add to this, which means we need that. And then we are obviously setting that. And then that's what we're adding. So we're building up a temporary array with all of the planets in this system which are scanned to less than knowledge level 3, as in they all need a short range scan. And we're basing that off of the distance. So once we've built this temporary array, once we've done that off of here, then the next thing we'll do is we will order this array by distance, and then we can just get whichever one has the lowest distance. So we can do order, sort struct array by member name, and the member name is distance, ascending because we want the smallest one first. And then after we've done that, all we need to do is get the first entry in the array, because we've sorted it by distance, so that will be the closest planet. So now we know what the closest planet is in this system that requires scanning. So let's just tidy up some of this so that we're not creating spaghetti hell. Okay, so again, just going through the logic. So for each planet in the system, we loop through our exploration data, which should equal the number of planets that there are. And then if we find a match, we go ahead and we add that planet to the array whilst setting its distance. And then when all that's said and done, we then sort by distance, grab the closest one, and we can now send this across to the sensors, and we've got our large system object, and that's the struct that the sensors work from. So we can just give them that data directly without any messing about. However, we're going to do a for each loop with break on this, because again, anywhere we can save on runtime, the better. So if we've got a match, then we don't need to keep looping that array, because we're going through one planet at a time anyway. So if this equals true, then we don't need to keep looking in the rest of the array. So we may as well break that loop and save ourselves a little bit of runtime. Okay, that should sort that out. Right, so let's just check where we're at on here. So do we have a short range scan needed? Yes. Okay. Find closest target and send to helm. So we need to flag that this has been done, because we don't want it to keep doing this every tick. So to be honest, before so I was going to say, before we start doing this check, we could do with checking to see whether we're already actioning that. But same here. If there's a survey task lingering in the system, it will never get cleared. Maybe. Because we could swap these two around. Because what we could do, rather than looking to see whether or not this specific task is running, we could, before we even start doing the logic, so we could, like here, for example, or even better, here, we can check to see whether or not any of the various tasks that are needed for this action are in the system already, and if they are, then just don't proceed, because there's already a task running, which would save a lot of logic if we're currently in the middle of doing something, like we're on our way to a star system, the task is sat there in the queue, so don't get on with stuff. But that would stop it from doing a medium range scan immediately upon entering the system. It would sit there and wait for the ship to stop before doing the scan, and that's kind of wasting time, so I guess we don't want to do that. So as much as that would potentially save us a bit of CPU, it's probably better to do it specifically. So when it comes to this, so we've identified the closest planet, which is fine. We then need to send that to the sensors and then press the send to helm button. So we kind of need this to stop processing until that action has been completed. Because there's nothing stopping this from its next tick 1 second later. And it's going to take way less than a second for this to do its job, but we need to build in some resilience anyway, rather than just kind of hoping that it all happens on time. So we kind of need to set a Boolean to pause the logic until this has satisfied its completion. So just thinking about the task that we're going to raise. Yeah. Because right now, this isn't a task. Like, this isn't something, we're not raising this as a job that needs doing. So we need to make sure that we need to make sure that it comes up on the player's HUD that this is what they should be doing, but also that the NPC has a task raised that says that they should be doing this. And I suppose, and send to helm needs to be the logic check that we run to check that this has actually been done. So that's the Boolean we can use, the send to helm button. But we need a task that encompasses this. So as much as we've got our task for running a medium range survey, we need a task for find closest target and send to helm. Or not necessarily closest, but find local target less than knowledge level whatever and send to helm. Yeah, that's probably the cleanest way to do that, because we can have that task pop up in the list. We can then pause based on the task existing, because we can build that into this. So rather than having survey already running as a separate bit of logic, we can actually just have that as part of this. So we can just uplift that, pop it on here, there, and just have that as much as this can be firing, it won't action it if it's already doing it. Just kind of build in some resilience there. And we can do the same here. So if we make this activity a task, then the actual logic that we've got here, we can move this logic over to the NPC itself, because I suppose that's the kind of sort of the design philosophy with this, is that we want, like, the complex logic here, we want that to be running on the NPC, not on the task management system. So the task management system should be creating the tasks, and it should be managing the tasks in terms of tracking the next step or has something been completed. But when it comes to the logic behind completing the task, the NPC or player brain need to be doing that computation. So by that logic, it would be more correct for this to be running on the NPC rather than on the task system. So what the task system needs to focus on is raising that as a job for the NPC to perform. So basically we need to create this bridge task, and then we need to configure that on there. So if we do that a minute. So first of all, we want, well, like with the other one, we'll check to see whether the task is running first. If it is, then we'll wait. which means we don't necessarily need. I'll keep this handy, but we don't necessarily need that. And then we will create bridge task, and we want the BPI version of that. And then we will make that. So it's going to be sensors, and then we want to create that order essentially on this list and set it as pending. And then we don't need those because we're just sending that through as a task. So we'll uplift all of that and move it to the NPC, and then this will just be this after having checked that this task that we create isn't already running. So the next thing we need to do is go to our list of possible orders and add a new one. Yeah, I'm not sure it's got that bad, man. So this is a medium range, so select new medium range target. Yeah, sort of send to helm needs, yeah, I'll put that in there. Select new medium range target for helm. Yeah. Select medium range target for helm. That will do. And we'll group these by sensor mode at some point. Okay, select medium range target for helm. So that's the command that will give the NPC, and equally that's the same command that would come up on the player HUD. And then when you've done that and sent it to helm, then that would be marked as complete. So from a player's perspective, if you're sat at the helm or you're sat at the sensors, then if an NPC captain is in command, then you'll keep getting these little tasks popping up on your helm, on your UI rather, to do this and do that. So rather than it explicitly telling you which buttons to press, it'll say this is the action I want you to perform. So it'll be select the next target, send it to the helm, and then the helm will then get a task for navigate to the sensor target. So those tasks are being generated, bouncing between the two bridge stations, and that will just keep happening until we run out of targets within that system, in which case the overall objective will be set to complete. And again, it should work as much for players as it does for NPCs. So our pause logic for that should be, if we do a for each loop with break, and we'll borrow our criteria match. Let's move all this out of the way. So does that task equal that? If it does, then we've got our criteria match, and we can stop looping the array. Again, just a bit of optimization there. Okay, so we've identified that this task that we were about to raise already exists in the system, so we don't need to raise it again. So our boolean there then. So if criteria match is true, do nothing. If it is false, as in it does not exist in the system, then we'll go ahead and create that task in the system. So basically what we're doing here is we're only going to raise that task if it doesn't exist, and if all of the previous logic checks pass. And this is to stop the logic just raising tasks over and over. So we'll identify that there's at least one planet that needs scanning. So then we'll go ahead and raise a task to identify what the closest one of those is. Raise the task, and then if that returns false, then it will just stop there, and it will wait until it's true. And of course we don't need any outputs on this one because that is an endpoint. Now all this logic we now need to recreate on our sensors NPC. So on the console we are basically checking to see whether any sensors tasks exist. If there are no sensors tasks in the system, then we do nothing. That's fine, we can just forget about it. Let's just double check. Yeah, just making sure that we're checking against the station and not against the task itself. We check to see, is that task pending? If it is, we assign it to ourselves and then go no further. And then 1 second later, it's not pending, so we can then begin actioning that task. So the logic that we were about to copy needs to go here. So we'll grab all of that from there, and we will compile and save that. And then on the sensors NPC, we will pop that on there. Now, one thing we're going to be lacking is our sector location details, which we'll need to hook up, and our existing exploration data, which again we will need to hook up. All of that for now can be collapsed. So find new target. Okay, so every second we are going to try and action whatever the task is that is assigned to this bridge station. Now, the problem we've got now, of course, is we need to fill out these variables. Yeah, so we can create our local variable for that. We can create potentially that one. Let's just have a look at how we're going to manage that, because what I'll probably do, where are we? If we grab this and we also make sure that we grab a copy of that data on here. So there's a copy of our current system. And then probably the easiest thing to do, I was going to say update that sensor data when this is updated, but then this won't update after we've done a scan. So really we need to be doing that continuously. Yeah, so we're probably better off doing it on this task, because this is the only one that actually needs it. So if we grab what we did for this one, so where we're checking and setting that, if we grab a copy of that and we pop that on our sensors NPC, right, so grabbing our exploration data. So we need a reference to our order, which, where's our console tick, which is that basically. And then we can grab our coordinates from that. So rather than using that, we'll replace it with that. So just check we've got a match. So if we do have a match, then we want to create our exploration data, which satisfies the need for that variable there. Move that down here. And then we can go ahead and loop through all that. Yeah, and the interesting one is if we don't have any data, any exploration data, yeah, because this order that we're creating is explicitly looking for any planets that don't have that are not scanned to level 3. So I think we need to specify that on here. So select medium range target. Less than knowledge level 3. Just kind of abridge that a little bit so it's not quite so wordy. So select medium range target, less than knowledge level 3 for helm. Yeah, and then we can add other target selection criteria as an order, so that this one can then be specific. Because we're specifically looking for less than knowledge level 3. Yeah, so if we don't have anything any data that we can work with, I think that's just going to have to be a stall at that point, because there is no exploration data, so we've got nothing to compare against. So we're just going to have to keep failing until there is some exploration data. Although I suppose if you're within a star system, because we need to deal with these edge cases. So if you're within a star system, you've literally just flown there, you haven't bothered doing any scanning by the time you get there, and you just issue this command, then we want the NPC to be able to select the closest thing that needs to be explored, even if there isn't any existing exploration data because you haven't scanned it yet. So in that case, I think we will do a different version of this down here somewhere, where we're not bothering to check the knowledge level of anything because we don't need to. Instead, we will just grab our targets in this system, and we'll do our same distance check and that. Yeah, and that can just be that, actually. Yeah, so the logic behind this one is much simpler, because for each object we are just measuring the distance away, and then recreating our struct array, and then we'll do the same as we did here. We'll just sort the array by distance, and then get the first one. So that's what we can do if we don't have any exploration data. We'll literally just get the closest thing to us and go and scan that. Otherwise, we will get the closest thing that actually does have some scan data already. So both that and that essentially need to point at the same thing, which is to do the helm bit of this job. That's the tricky bit. Right, so yeah, so either we're creating exploration data and working from it, or we're not, and we're just getting the closest planet. Again, we need to make sure that that we're checking some criteria on this. And we built an audit log on the last stream where we can actually trigger audit updates for every button that's pressed. And I think we're going to have to use that to make sure that this doesn't fire twice. Although, even if it did fire twice, we're going to target the same planet anyway, because it's still the closest planet. But I think when we create the task, so when we're doing this task here, on here, we're doing the variable setting, and that one specifically is the one we want to set as false. So as soon as we create our bridge task, we just log that in our debug messages so we can see that it's been done. We raise the task in the array, and then depending on the task, we can set some booleans, which are our check criteria. So then it will keep trying to close the task until this returns true, and then in this case it will close the task. So when we do our manage bridge tasks here, we simply need to check for center helm having been pressed, and if it has, then we'll just clear out our sensors task like so. So this is now running 10 times per second, so we've got 10 chances per logic run to capture the fact that that has actually been done. So as long as that entire action takes less than a second, we should be covered. And it should do. It should happen like within a tick, so we should be fine. So okay, so that handles the completion of that. Yeah, and then we need to make sure that, obviously we need to make sure that we process that here as well. So when we do our audit log for our button press, we need to make sure that the right button has been pressed. So that is sensors center helm, and if that appears in our audit log, we know that the button has been pressed. Therefore we can set the variable to true, and then the looping function, that one, will see that as true and clear the sensors task. So that should be set up to work now. So the last part of that is making sure that the center helm button actually fires this log entry, this audit log entry. And that aside, we then need to set up the actual sensors panel action as well, which is the kind of NPC action injection side of things. Okay, so what's the best way of doing that? I guess we need to fire fire an event on the sensors themselves. So we grab that. So these were the old NPC actions. So when it comes to targeting an option, a target on the system, which I don't think we have. Yeah, we can probably reuse this one. Because what we're doing is we're giving it that reference, that struct, that's what we're firing through. We don't need to care about that. That is the proxy for having pressed the button. So we will go ahead and assume that the medium range sensors button needs pressing. So we will press the button, wait a second. Again, this is this is basically slowing the NPC down so that they're pressing things kind of the same cadence a player would. So you're pressing the medium range button, waiting a second or so, then you're pressing the next button. So we just kind of, so the NPC isn't doing it all instantly. So we don't need that at all. So that can go. So we go to medium range just to make sure that, again, like if the player has pressed one of the different sensor mode buttons, we need to make sure that the NPC always goes to the right page before choosing the action. Yeah, then we'll set the range on the sensors so that object is within range. Set our target, and then that should be our center helm. So on the UI itself, do we have a copy of that to hand? Yeah, there. So on medium range, we should have a center helm button there. So all we're doing, when we press the center helm button, we're firing this update center helm target button or function on the parent blueprint. And we're just sending it that large system object reference. So what we're doing on here is we're firing that exact same function, except we're passing that large system object reference through from the NPC instead. So it's having the effect of sending the same thing through. Now that should target the object in the list on the UI. It won't scroll it into view, so if it's something that's not currently visible on screen, we need to, as some further polish on this, make sure that object is scrolled into view when it's clicked. But for now, it will just target it in the background. And again, that will fire the center helm button, which is this. And then we will send that across the player controller to handle replication. So again, it doesn't matter if the player does it or the NPC does it. The replication path is still firing the exact same functions. So once we've done that, we need to trigger the audit log. So if we do get gameplay message subsystem, so broadcast message, right, so that's our audit log, and all we care about right now is the action ID. And that action ID has to match exactly the action ID that we are expecting on here, which is sensors center helm. So I'll pop that on there. And the channel is audit log button press. So as soon as the center helm So as soon as the center helm button is pressed, then we fire the audit log action, which will just compile that a sec. That will be flagged up on here because we're listening for that broadcast. It will grab the action ID there, set that to true, and then as far as this is concerned, that action has been completed, the button has been pressed. Yeah, we can do. We can flag events from animations at some point, much further down the line, obviously. You say a timer node, all total war. Do you mean? Hang on, let's go back to it. So delaying for a second. So there's nothing waiting on this. This is just an action delay so that these things aren't all happening on top of each other. I mean, we could do this and set a timer that way. I mean, fundamentally, what's the difference between these two? And you say it's seriously not great practice, but why? What's going to break if we use a delay rather than the timer? Which one are we working on? That one. Okay, so we need to grab a reference to the sensors on here. So let's just make sure we do that once and once only. Actually, we will gate that behind our loading check. So the channel would be, where are we? Startup levels loaded. So we know that all the levels are loaded, so we're safe to go ahead and grab a reference to our blueprint because we know that everything's been loaded at this point. So that we're not going to be looking for something that's not there yet. Okay, so that just gives us a reference to that, which means on here we can grab that. In fact, why don't we cast to that? I might not actually need to cast to that because we're getting it from there, but yeah, didn't think so. So that's all good. Right, so the event we're firing on there is target large system object. Actually, specifically, targeting sensor system target. Actually, let's get rid of that because that's kind of implied. So I just want that to make sense for the future when I look at it in 6 months' time and wonder why I did that. Okay, so from our NPC, we're just going to target system object. And the same here. Okay, so again, just to recap, we're checking for exploration data. If we've got some, we find an actual planet with actual scan data less than the required one. If we don't have any sensors data already, then we just go ahead and we get the closest planet to us. And then we send that across to the sensors and then the helm. And then the event that we are firing on that one, the event that we're firing here, ultimately presses the center helm button, which then triggers our audit log, which in turn sets that to true, which in turn removes the task from the list. So having done all that, let's just see how quickly it breaks. And we don't need pretty much any of this, so yeah. So this whole thing is redundant now. Because we're no longer using the department-specific task managers. We're now doing it through a global task manager instead. Pick Alpha Centauri as it's close. So explore command target. Off we pop. So again, we've got our shipwide order, we've got our helm task, and that will persist until we arrive. And then once we've arrived, we switch to medium range and we've run our scan, then we should see a local object targeted, the closest one to the ship, and then the sensor's task should vanish because we haven't actually hooked up the logic for the helm task to come next. So we've automatically started doing our scan. Obviously that's looking a bit weird because it keeps rescaling the UI as we're approaching for each one. Okay, so what's happening now? So it's doing it. It's actually bringing up the target, which is good. And it's obviously constantly rescaling the UI as we go. No, it's not. Oh, it is. So yeah, so what it's doing, so it's bringing up the task. The send to helm button is being pressed, which is clearing the task. So you can see the task name there. Select medium range target, blah, 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 blah. So that's all working. The logic we don't have now is checking to see whether or not we have a target which is a valid target with respect to the overall shipwide mission, which is to scan anything that's not already fully scanned. So it's going to continually raise that task and complete it. And again, it's targeting the closest thing to the ship, which in this instance is the star, which is why it's continually targeting the star. Not sure why it's clearing the target each time, but yeah, it's going ahead and targeting it. So the next bit of logic is, let's find that in a minute. So we need something in the middle here to determine whether or not we are already en route to the system, to the object we're looking for. Get out of the way. So we've determined that a short-range scan is required, and that will still correctly return true. So we want it to continue to return true. But before we go ahead and do the logic for creating the task for finding the next scannable planet, I guess we need to see whether or not the thing we currently have targeted is a valid target. Yeah, that's probably the best way of doing that. So for this then, we're going to need our sensors data, which I don't think we're storing a local copy of. So if we get our game state, cast to our StarSim game state, get our live sensors data. So again, this is a copy of anything we might have targeted or anything else. And specifically, we want our current sensor nav target. So that's the thing we sent to helm last. And then I guess we need to have our exploration data. And our system bodies. The only thing we need from that is the seed, really. So what we want to know is, in our exploration data, does that seed match something that that is a valid target to be scanned? So again, we need to do our for each, and this strikes me as something that we need to macro here in a minute, because we're doing the same thing quite a bit. So I think we'll go ahead and use our handy criteria match variable. Actually, we'll do that for each loop with break. So, need an and in here, don't we? So, if knowledge level is less than 3, yeah, so we have a matching seed, essentially, our matching ID, and the knowledge level is less than 3, then that is a valid target because that's the kind of thing we need to be flying towards to scan. So basically that's our yes no. So do we have, and are we currently on our way to something which is valid? If we are, then do nothing. If we are not, then that's where we need to raise the task. So let's go ahead and connect that to that, and then collapse that. Do we have a valid nav target? Oui or non? Okay, that should sort that out. So now we know whether or not we should be erasing anything there. So if that returns as false, then we know that we've literally scanned everything. That checks if we're on the way to the right place. So that is all good. Do nothing. And then this one is raising the task. Great. So that just gives us that additional logic check. And that should stop it from creating that target over and over and over and over. Okay, so once... Yeah, so we need to then create the helm target. So we need to kind of fold that into this somewhere. So yes, we need to do a scan. Yes, we have a valid nav target. So I suppose, yeah, the next point then is sending that to the helm, actually getting the helm to do something with it. So tell helm to use sensor target. And again, we'll do tell helm to nav to sensor target. We will do a check before this, I guess, as part of, in the same way that we'll do some logic there to check the validity of the action before we do it. We'll do the same thing here. We'll check the validity of this before actually creating the task. Because if there's already a helm action and we're already on our way to the valid target, then there's no point repeating this action. Okay, so from a test perspective then, let's just make sure that this is working as intended, and just make sure that we raise that target, that medium range target, and we send it to the helm. So we should see, our, when we press use sensor target, we should see the thing that should have targeted on here. Give me Alpha Centauri. Right. Set us on our way. Yeah, well, as we build this out and as we kind of add more functionality to it, then we need to deal with more edge case scenarios. Like, what if you just change your mind halfway? I mean, that does work now, so that is something you can do. So if we wanted to go and explore this neutron star instead, then what we can do is we can just set our orders to explore that instead, and you'll see that the ship will now change course to that star, and all of this remains valid. So we do have the ability to change our mind halfway through if we want to. And the important thing is that it didn't drop out of autopilot or turn off the FTL, because it does a state check on these things first. It's slightly less stupid than it was. Okay, so what we're looking to see here is, first of all, it will start doing its medium range scan whilst I drink tea, so it's doing the job for me. And then when the medium range scan is complete, it should then target whatever is closest to the ship at the time, and then send that to the helm. Okay. That's interesting. So it's not targeting and untargeting as aggressively as it was before, although I think now we've arrived it is. maybe. But let's just see whether or not it pressed the center helm button. So right now, oh yeah, it did. No, and it's clearing that. So it's sending an invalid target across. Okay, so in the logic, I think it's time to start doing some debug spam, because we need to know what it thinks it's doing at this point. So I have a suspicion that either that isn't being set. Let's just double check a minute. Let's get rid of you. Grab that one. Okay, no, it is setting it. So sensor nav target, that's the thing we're querying, and that's what we're setting. So we're running this event, and we are targeting this object here. So again, we're doing that as the server, and then we're setting our selected system object as that. And then we're following up a second later by pressing the center helm button, and we're sending through. Oh, hang on a minute. That's the wrong struct. Or is it? No, it's not. It's just named wrong. Right, so now it's just an object. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's the same struct there. Right, and then we are updating our sensors data, which we're updating on the UI, and then we're broadcasting that out shipwide, which should be updated then on game state. And I will just double check game state to make sure that it is. Yeah, it is. So we're sending event sensors data, and we're updating that variable on game state. So event sensors data. So the variable we're reading should be correct, and it should have the right information on it. And we're definitely setting it as sensor nav target, and that's what we're reading here, sensor nav target. And again, we're getting that from game state. So either our ID match is wrong, and it could, no, it wasn't that. It might have been the object ID instead, but I'm reasonably confident it's the seed that we were comparing against. So yeah, let's go ahead and do the debug. So we know that's returning true, which it should. So on here then, let's go ahead and add a bit of debug spam in there. and I want to know so our ID is that, our seed is that, and our knowledge level is that. So ID, seed, knowledge level. I just want to see whether or not the ID and the knowledge level are indeed matching. I mean, they should, otherwise this wouldn't fire true. So actually that's a pointless debug, because of course it's true. Although, now we will keep it, because if that is true, and we do have a criteria match, now then it wouldn't do anything anyway. So it is reporting false. So the only way it would report false is if that wasn't matching. So I think what we'll do is stick a do once in there, and then we shall stick that on screen for a minute and make it garish. And let's just make sure it appears all on one line as well, just so that we can do some comparisons between all these variables to see where the comparison is failing. It might be the fact that it's not actually saving the exploration data, but we shall see. Okay, just wave cheerio to Earth. And I've run out of tea. Disaster. To switch to fizzy water. So again, we should see them switch to medium range all on their own, do the medium range scan all on their own, and then we'll see what it comes up with for the comparison between the exploration data and all of the planets that are there. Oh, that's interesting. Didn't come up with anything. Did I foolishly not tick the thing? Oh, I didn't. Look at that. Sigh. Yes, it is. So one of the things that I need to do on my very, very long to-do list is remodel these consoles, because they are like 4 years old or something. So yes, the screen needs to be made bigger. But I will make these a lot more detailed compared to what they are now. Well, yeah, the edge consoles aren't here on this one, but yes, so the edge consoles and these ones will have a similar theme to them, and will be made much more detailed and much nicer, with working cup holders. Yeah, usually CSI. See, generally speaking, bugs are interesting because it's when the code's not doing what you expect it to do. So, like by its very nature, it's interesting. It's like, hang on a minute, it shouldn't be doing that. That intrigues me. I'll fix the ship teleporter as well, so that we don't have to keep waiting each time. I need to set up the command parsing on the new chat system. Wouldn't surprise me. Yep, always the case. Never enough hours in a day. Yeah, I think they're getting visibility blocked. Still not doing any debug. Okay, which means that we're definitely not getting any matches whatsoever on that. Okay, so let's see why not. Right, so we're comparing the ID against the seed, and we're seeing if knowledge level is less than 3. Yeah, that's the right logic. So if... yeah, because that's our current nav target. So, yes, so if our nav target is matching something that has a exploration level lower than 3, then that is a valid target and that should return true. So that logic is right. So the only thing I can think of is that they're that the ID and seed aren't matching. So the way the NPC optimization works is that when you can't see them, they go invisible, they stop animating, they do all kinds of optimization-y stuff to make them more lightweight. So you can see that one there just appeared. And it uses the pawn sensing on the character to detect whether or not there's a pawn there. And if it senses them, then it makes them visible. What I will do is I'll put a check on them to see whether a player is within a reasonable range. So if a player is within, say, 10 meters, then they'll always be visible and they won't ever try and hide. So you won't get to a situation where there could be an NPC stood behind you, you turn around and they suddenly appear from nowhere. That will kind of stop that from happening. But yeah, if they go invisible, it's because it thinks you can't see them. So I imagine what was happening here is they were probably going behind this bit of glass. Right, let's see what we get this time. Okay, so the IDs of the planets are correctly large numbers because they are indeed seeds. But the seed value that we're getting from the sensor data is coming back as 0, which is why we're not seeing a match, which is interesting. Interesting in the curious kind of sense. Which means that this is probably not valid. So if we go for, instead of that, selected system object. So selected system object is the first thing that we set ahead of our center helm. It's not as valid because really we want to check the thing that has been sent to the helm. But we'll figure out what's going on with that. But let's just see whether or not we have the data we're looking for in there, because it might be the case that this isn't valid, but it should be because we are setting it on game state. Yeah, because we're setting that. We're setting that, and we do know that the data is there because when we press the button on the helm, that's where it's getting it from. So that's how it knows what the nav target is, or rather the sensor target. That's how it knows what the sensor target is, because it's pulling it from this data. So it is odd that that's not flagging, but let's see what it says using the other target. Because on the sensors, you've got the sensor target, which is the thing that the sensors is currently looking at. But when you click send to helm, so when you click that button there, it's creating another reference to that target, which then stays resident. So you can target other stuff, and until you click that button again, it will continue to be the first thing you clicked when you clicked it. Which means that at any point, the helm can use the sensor target that was set when you press the button, as opposed to what you have targeted at any particular moment. So yeah, that data should remain valid. Unless, of course, I broke it on the UI, which is not altogether impossible. I'll test that if this works. Yeah, I think you're talking about capabilities well beyond what we'd be building here. I mean, for a start, you'd have to have some kind of large cloud infrastructure on the same level as Google to have street level scale information on Earth. Not to mention the fact that we're dealing with Earth 200 years in the future. I mean, ultimately, you know, there's a reason that Star Citizen's the only game that's got like planet-wide cities, and that's because they've had $1 billion in budget. Yeah, and that too. Yeah, don't ever expect to see one-to-one scale cities that you can wander around. That's just unrealistic. That's just not a reasonable expectation. Okay, so that worked. So as you can see here, we've got matching IDs. So the ID and the seed are matching. So we have a valid target that's been set. And it's no longer flashing. Yeah, so I mean, Star Citizen has a city planet. I don't think that's Microtech, is it? I can't remember now. It's been a long time since I played it. But their city planet, from what I remember, isn't like street level. You can't land anywhere on the planet and walk around city streets with people and vehicles and things. It's just buildings that you fly over. There's no actual ground detail. And ArcCorp, that was it, thank you. Yeah, and I wouldn't expect there to be ground level detail either, because to render an entire planet with vehicles and streets and people and road signs and litter blowing by, I mean, you're talking like supercomputer levels of data processing and storage. It would be insane. Certainly I mean, you could locally generate procedural content as you move around the planet, but none of it would ever be meaningful. Like those NPCs that would spawn where you are and walk those streets couldn't have a daily routine or any kind of meaningful stats that persist when you're not there. You could only ever generate things locally to where you are and then have them destroyed when you leave. I mean, just the RAM you'd need alone to store all that would be insane. Oh yeah, there was one other thing I wanted to test. So just purely out of interest, if I target that and send it to the helm. Do we actually have anything? Yes, we do. So that is actually working. Let's get use sensor target working as an actual task and see what they come up with on there. Yeah, but I think even GTA or Cyberpunk, those NPCs don't have lives within those cities. They're spawned on the fly as you approach them, and as soon as you drive off into the distance, those NPCs are gone, and all the information about them is lost. So none of them have routines that they actually follow on a day-to-day life. Like, they don't have homes that they live in, they don't have jobs that they go to. There's nothing about them that remains persistent. So yeah, you could do something along those lines, but it would be not the level of detail you would want for that sort of thing. Like, we're planning to do like village level surface settlements, so approaching it in a similar way to how Minecraft does villages. So when we're generating a planetary terrain, obviously we'll have biomes and that sort of thing, and within that biome, algorithmically, we can generate limited NPC villages and populate those villages with people, and that will be, again, the sort of thing where they're spawned procedurally and you can interact with them procedurally, but they won't be persistent. So if you destroy the village and kill all the people and then come back later, they'd be back again, because the only way to make that persistent and keep it persistent is to start storing that data, and you then have to do that for literally every planet in the game. And when you've got 100 to 400 billion star systems, you cannot store that level of data, so it has to be procedural. So yeah, animals, anything really on a planetary surface, it is non-persistent. So you can kill the same thing over and over and over every time you come back and it regenerates. But it does mean that we can make villages and have it populated with aliens in a non-persistent way. But at least, it's there for the experience, but not for persistence. Right, so use sensor target. Okay, there we go. So we're not actually doing anything. So like with the sensors one, we need to first of all grab a reference to the sensors console. Yeah, so we're grabbing our task manager. Let's tidy that up a bit. Yeah, so we want to identify our task manager and then begin our tick. And we don't need to do that a second time because we've already gated that there. And then we can create that. Right, so we've got a reference to our sensors console. And this one should be a lot simpler because we're simply going to press the button as opposed to set up anything specifically. So we just need a reference to our sensors console, and then we'll have an event we can trigger on there. So this was all of our NPC tasks. So yeah, so we have a new event on there. So custom event. Actually, we do have a radial menu action that we can fire through to the widget itself. Where are you? That one. Because here, on our bridge commands, we've got these action IDs. So one of them is in fact, or should be, use or the center helm. Do we not have that? No, we don't. So yeah, let's add that. So sensors medium send to. Of course, it's not the sensors we want, is it? It's the helm one. Hang on, I'm going insane. It's not the sensors console we want, it's the helm. And specifically not that one. So we want this one. So again, I've when I originally set these up, I named them stupid names, which is really not useful to us. So there's like warp controls, which is this one, which is meaningless for what it actually is used for. And I think that one's called orbit controls, just to confuse myself. So it's BP warp controls. That's the base widget, and then I think this one was called warp widget. Yeah, I do need to get on and rename them at some point. But yes, we have the same thing here where we've got our bridge commands gameplay messaging channel. So for this one, we do have that button set up. So all we need to do is, rather than target the UI specifically, we can just fire out or broadcast the message on that channel using this action ID. So rather than doing that, we can do this essentially. So use, oops, no, we don't want to do that. Helm use sensor target. And I shall collapse these down in a sec. And when those are fired on the actual UI, which one was it? Warp widget, where are you? There you are. So we're sending button ID 15, and then 15 on here is sending out the audit log, which should close that task. So let's just verify. So send that to helm. And then right now it's all zeros. Use sensor target. And there we go. So when we do that, we should see a task appear and then disappear quickly. So let's just bring that up a minute. Oh, I always back through that. That's our surface teleporter. I will move it one day. Right, so use sensor target, task is raised, and task is cleared. Perfect. So if we clear the target, use sensor target, target comes back, and if we just target that, assuming it's not the same one, use command target, changes it to that, use sensor target, changes it back to that. Right, and oh, that's tiny. What did I target? Oh, Mars. No. Mercury, Venus, no, it's Mars. Oh, hill radius. Does Mars only have a radius of 780 kilometers? That doesn't sound right. No, 3,000 something kilometers. Hang on then. What if I press it? Nah, that's more like it. Okay, so that's correct for Earth. Ah, now it's correct. This radius tracking is definitely something that keeps tripping up. And I'm not sure why, because we are very specifically giving it that radius value. Where did it get 780 from? Like which object in our system has that? Okay, so it's not Mercury. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Ceres. Oh, 470, so it was bigger than that. So I don't know where it got 780 from. Yeah, exactly, AJ. Something somewhere is messing with the radius value. which is throwing off the autopilot. I'm not quite sure what exactly. Hang on, let's find out. Yeah, the moon radius is 1700 kilometers, so it's not even that. So it's quite a, it's an object half the size of the moon, whatever it is. Don't know. It's a mystery. But yeah, I need to track how that radius is being updated across the board. Obviously, we've got various different systems that are capable of updating that value for various valid reasons. So I just need to see which one is messing us up. And I suppose the other thing, yeah, the other thing is why are we not getting the right approach data on there as well? Okay, so out of interest, let's see at what point that radius changes. So I've told it to explore the star system, so we're raising all the relevant tasks. So we should see the target radius update. Now, once we've set our helm target, the radius should not be updated unless something specifically updates the helm, of which nothing should be. So we're just waiting to see whether that updates. So as soon as it says raising sensor task at the top of the screen, like that, we now know that it's doing a medium range scan rather. So the medium range scan is currently running. And we're just waiting for that scan to finish. Okay, so interestingly, it's targeted something else, but we're not going to that location because it's still, our actual target is still there. So if we press use sensor target, it will take us to whatever that object was. So what did it target? So right there it's saying that the central star is targeted, but so not that one, not that one. think we've just flown outside the system. Yeah, so none of these have a radius of 470. Oh, and it's gone back to the star again. Yes, there's a weird radius update going through from somewhere, and the sensors are doing something additional that they shouldn't be doing. Just need to track down what. The radius of Sag is in like AUs, it's huge. Thanks, Charlie. On our Discord server, we've got like an idea factory channel. So if you've ever got any ideas you want to share, just feel free to post them there. I hope not. We shouldn't. Well, hopefully we won't have a bug that takes that long to fix. Oh, I think I know why. I know why this is messing up the second time round. It's because we're changing. Obviously, we're clicking on stuff which is changing this, and that's why we need to use this specifically, because that is sort of transitory as you click stuff on the UI, whereas that is set in stone when you press the button. So we really want to stick to the sensor nav target. So we need to make sure that this is being updated properly. So with that in mind, let's just grab some details for this. So we've got our seed, and we'll also go for our galactic coords. Our local coords. And I suppose we'll go for our type. And we'll give it a title as well. A tweetle. Right, so give it that seed. Give it a type from there. Stick in our coordinates. give it our level 3 name. That's the most detailed version of it. Just so we can see what it is we actually have targeted. If these are recording null values, then we know that our sensor nav target data is not being saved properly, and that could be part of the issue with this. But twitchiness aside, I think the general framework is working now. So we do have the ability to raise, track and manage these tasks, and the NPCs are fairly adept at following them. We've just got a few logic niggles that just need to be ironed out. But that's ultimately why we're doing this way, as opposed to making it just a scripted action, because those scripted actions can be tripped up and interrupted, and you can press buttons at the same time as the NPC. There are many ways in which you can screw up what the NPC is doing, either on purpose or by accident. But if we have a monitorable task that they're working towards, then they can always recover from whatever it is we do to them. So as more in depth and time consuming as this is to build, it's definitely worth it. Oh, thank you, Danger Mouse. Very much appreciated. Let's see what it says. So we're expecting the output from when it presses center helm. Yeah, so that kind of tells us what we need to know, really. So the galactic coordinates and the local coordinates are basically zeroed out values. The seed is 0, and we've got default values coming from the struct. So it's an Earth analog, the title of planet name. So that's definitely defaults. Right. Okay. So we know that this data is correct in the sense that our selected sector location data is coming back correctly. So one of the things in this struct is definitely correct. So, selected system object. So the sensor nav target has no reason not to be there, because this struct is being saved and replicated and everything else. So the question is why is it when we send this specifically, is it not doing what it's supposed to be doing? Now I'm wondering whether or not we drive this directly from the thing we currently have selected on this side of the widget blueprint relationship. So on here, on the event graph there, when we press send to helm. There it is. Yeah, so we're grabbing our live sensors data, and we're getting the selected system object from that, and that's what we're sending through. So I'm thinking rather than doing that, we'll use what we have here, because the data we have here should be more relevant and more up to date than what we have on the widget. And I think especially because, and not that it should make a difference because we were giving it that reference anyway, but if we are, where are we? Here. If we're forcing the target and then pressing this button, then rather than just giving it that data, which it doesn't seem to be liking, we can instead read it from here. So if we get that, and this will probably freeze for a minute, so hang on, let me just compile and save. This is quite a monstrous blueprint, so it really hates it when you press this button. It's a big struct on a big blueprint, so it takes a while to untick everything. So what we'll want to do is get our selected system object, and we'll pipe that through to here rather than passing it through from the UI. Because ultimately that gets set when you target something anyway. Okay. Okay, so we're just going to break that completely. So if we just verify that it works normally, so when we target anything on this list, we're setting that selected system object entry on the struct. So when we click send to helm, it's now reading the data from whatever we had targeted. So if we come over here and press use sensor target, then we have that live information, and importantly we have our radius. So if we select something else, Earth in this instance, and we now tell the NPC to do it, so use sensor target, we should have Earth targeted with Earth's radius, which we do. So if we select Mars and send that to helm, and then we say navigate to sensor target, don't know how much we hooked that up. Yeah, so we're seeing zeros across the board there, and we are going to Sajay. That's fine. I don't think I actually hooked that up, so that's not entirely unexpected. But that was at least working. So if we grab Alpha Centauri again, and then we'll give it some shipwide orders. So that's now created our shipwide task. So what I'm hoping to see is that when we complete our medium range scan, we see some actual data come up for our sensor target, our center helm target, as opposed to just 0 values. Okay, so there's our medium range scan. Yeah, that's better. So that was interesting. So we actually did come up with actual data, and then it continued selecting some nonsense after the fact, which is interesting. Okay, so when it initially fired, this was correct. It did have the correct data, which is good. So we need to make sure that we actually have that passing as true on here. Yeah, so we'll keep the same information, and we'll keep it there for a minute just so we can read it. So the moment that this returns true, because initially this will be false because we haven't pressed the button yet. So in terms of our logic here, do we have a valid nav target? The first run through is going to be false, so we will then create our nav target. Now the next run, the second time it runs, we should get a valid reference, and from that point that should remain valid, because there should be no reason to press the center helm button. There should be no reason to press that a second time, because that should then return true. From that point, in which case we're going up this path, and right now nothing is going to happen. So what we need to see is, I guess we want to see two runs of that node. The first one reporting 0 values or default values, and the second one reporting actual values, and then no more. It shouldn't fire again after that. If it is, then some logic somewhere is not doing the thing it's supposed to be doing. It was stewards or deck, because the deck crew are responsible for the general operation of the vessel, so it makes sense for the deck crew to be under environmental control, because they're checking things like the fire alarms, things like the temperature settings across the ship and that sort of stuff, the day-night shift lighting controls. So they're kind of controlling the environment aboard the vessel, and that's kind of in the deck crew's wheelhouse. You could make an argument for stewards, I mean, but stewards is more cooking, cleaning, and looking after the crew, whereas deck is more looking after the ship, which is why I think having it in deck kind of edges in that way. That was interesting. So I think the reason we got a valid data on the last run is because I pressed the button. So if I target it and quickly press center helm, see, we now have valid coordinates, but it is still, yeah, it is still trying to target something else. That's interesting, and now it's not. So if I select it and press center helm myself, then that fixes it, and it no longer kind of freaks out trying to click stuff once per second. It's quite happy that we have a matching target and it's going to the right place. So when we're injecting the button press from the NPC, it's not properly setting that selected target, which is interesting. I think what I'll do, and probably not tonight now because we're just about to hit midnight, I think what I'll do is I'll set up a test command where, rather than having to fly all the way to the system that we're investigating, I'll have it just start exploring the system we're in. In fact, yeah, I'll add the explore current system command, because the same logic is going to be running for that. So all the logic we're doing here is exactly the same. We're just missing the "are we in the right one" bit of the equation. Everything else remains the same. So if we start exploring the Sol system, then we can save time by not having to fly there each time. And then we need to track down why raising that task on here isn't working on the sensors. So either, and this could also be an option, either this is not sending through a valid object, so this could be sending through defaults, which wouldn't be helping the situation, or this is returning false, and then this is not sending through the right data either. So we've got two places where that could be messing up. But I think yeah, I think it's probably more likely that this is the bit that's failing, because our code on the sensors, specifically this, has been working perfectly fine for a long time, and all we're doing is just firing the same data across. So it must therefore be the case that this selected system object, which we're setting here, is not setting properly. Like we're missing some data there somewhere. In fact, that must be the case. That's the only thing I can think of that would mess it up. Yeah, so when we trigger this, it kind of resets everything on that mode. So anything you've got targeted currently is kind of nullified and such, just so we're starting with a fresh plate. And then having the delay in there just gives us that breathing room to make sure everything gets set. That just handles the display range, so that's not related to anything pertinent that we're doing with the targeting. And then this. So I think what we'll do is we will make sure we'll do a debug on this to make sure we're reporting the right values, and then we'll do another debug, I guess both here and here, to make sure it's passing through player controller all the way, just to make sure that the data is making it right the way to the point where we're updating the sensor's state file. So yeah, that's going to be my job for the next hour, I expect. But I shall do that off stream, because we are hitting midnight and it is time for me to go and have a stretch, have a bit of a walk, make a new cup of tea, and then sort of clear my head a bit and reapproach this with a fresh brain. So, thank you once again, everyone, for bearing with us while we walk through some of these more complicated systems. I know it can be a bit dry dealing with all this code and debugging, but it's the nature of the beast when you're doing game dev. Sometimes you just have to knuckle down and grind through the code until it works. But yeah, I find it fun anyway. So Sunday, again, there won't be a stream on Sunday because it's Mother's Day here, and I shall be visiting my mum and having a cup of tea with her, which will be lovely. So the next stream will be next Wednesday. So nothing until next Wednesday. All right, so happy Mother's Day for anyone that's in the UK. And yeah, I shall see you next week. So have a good one, and bye for now.